Good afternoon, everybody. Buenas tardes a todos. Hello. Ahora sí. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Hello. Buenas tardes. Hello, everybody. I know I jumped the gun, right? I was so eager to talk to you. I jumped the gun as soon as I saw the scrolling images. But anyway, my name is Patricia Perez, and I am an AARP California volunteer and serve as its state president emeritus. Greetings to all of you. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our monthly Let's Talk Dinero chat, where we discuss a variety of items to help you grow and keep your money to support your financial security. If you want to check back on videos of the various events, you can visit aarp.org. Let's Talk Dinero. And this session is being recorded, so later you'll be able to view this one as well. Today, we're going to talk about accessory dwelling units. An accessory dwelling unit, or an ADU, or what some people know as a granny flat, is a small residence that shares a single family lot with a larger primary residence. It has its own bathroom, kitchen, and sleeping area. Last month, we started the conversation on ADUs, and due to the popularity of the topic, we added a part 2. So now we brought an expert to talk to us. And AARP has long championed ADUs as a means to create more affordable housing and solution to aging in place. While ADUs benefit people of all ages, they are particularly beneficial to older adults, as they can help us remain in our communities, be closer to caregivers, generate additional income, and additionally expand housing options. To help us with today's discussion, it's my pleasure to welcome our speaker, Wendy Estrada. She is a senior loan officer who brings over 18 years of invaluable experience in banking and finance. And she has a true passion for educating communities on financing. And she has had the privilege of helping hundreds of families achieve the dream of home ownership. But before we jump on the conversation with Wendy, I want to give her an idea of our audience. So I'd like to start today with a quick poll. I just want her to know, what is the primary reason you are building an ADU? So please, if you don't mind, just responding, what is the primary reason you are building an ADU? And I mentioned there's many reasons. Some people need the income. Some people are thinking of staying in their community. Some people want to build the ADU for themselves and rent their primary residence. So it's kind of 50-50. Let's see, here are the results. So Wendy, you can see the results? Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. Very good. Oops, let me see. Let me close this. Thank you all for responding. And this is a conversation. I mentioned that this is a chat, so please submit your questions in the chat box. And if you're watching on Facebook, please submit your question in the comments. We want to get through as many as possible, since we have Wendy with us. But now I'd like to turn over the conversation over to Wendy. Wendy, bienvenida. Hello.
Hello. Thank you, Patricia, for that amazing introduction. And hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for participating in that poll. It's always great to see the reasons why you're interested in financing an ADU. And I'm very excited to be here to talk a little bit about financing an ADU and getting to a little bit of the questions that you might have when it comes to financing. Let me go ahead and launch my presentation here. I hope that everyone can see my screen. All right, let me just clear this so I can see. All right, so welcome to Loan Options to Finance an ADU. Again, my name is Wendy Estrada, Senior Loan Officer. Truly have a passion for helping individuals, and definitely when it comes to making your dreams come true with home ownership. So let's talk a little bit about, oh, did I pause that? Did I do something? Hold on. Okay, there we go. Can everyone see my screen? Hear me well?
Okay, we can.
Perfect. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to learn this evening. We're going to learn about the benefits of financing an ADU, the loan requirements when it comes to an ADU, the different finance options that you have, and also a couple of things to consider. So let's get started. So first, I'd like to start with letting you know that the average cost of an ADU can come in anywhere between $100,000 and $300,000. Give me a thumbs up with your emojis, letting me know if you are aware that this is the average cost. Did you know the average cost is between $100,000 and $300,000? I was pleasantly surprised. I think that was the amount that I was expecting, but I wanted to share with you all the average cost that you can expect. And of course, that cost increases depending on the size of an ADU that you're considering on building. Now let's talk a little bit about benefits of building an ADU. Some of you responded, the reasons why you wanted to build one was for rental income, maybe to house a loved one. And some of the benefits are, number one, it increases the property value for future, right? If you're planning to sell in the future, and it also increases your property value right after that ADU has been built. Number two, they also offer an immense potential for additional income. So if you're thinking about renting your home, but you don't want to share space, getting an ADU, it's a great opportunity for you to gain some additional rental income. And also number three, California law has now made it easier than ever to build a single family zone. So if you're in California, you're in a state that favors ADU. And actually starting October 11th, the governor has signed into a new law that ADUs can now be sold separately. There's a lot more information that we need to wait for that, but hopefully we'll get to share that information with you all. So these are some of the ADU benefits. Now, let's talk a little bit about finance options. So we know the benefits, right? Now, what do we need to actually get finance and get building on this ADU? So the traditional options that are available for you for financing an ADU are typically based upon the amount of equity that you have available in your home, your household income, savings, and credit worthiness. And we're going to go into detail. Let's talk about the most basic finance options for an ADU. So you've lived in your home for a couple of years. You now have built equity in your home, but instead of selling it, you want to either rent it for income. You want maybe your daughter to live in the back, your parents to live in the back. You want to rent it out to a sister. So what are the best finance options? Well, we have three that we will cover this afternoon. And we're going to start with a home equity loan. So a home equity loan, it's a fixed term loan like a mortgage, but it's secured by the equity in your home. So it's a separate line of credit that you will get, and it's a loan. They do give you a one lump sum check, and the interest rate will be fixed. Generally, the interest rate is a little bit higher than what you have on your first mortgage, but it's definitely a lot lower than credit cards or personal loans. And how much you can borrow, typically it's up to 80 or 85% of the equity in your home. The main thing to remember with a home equity loan is that it's fixed because they are giving you an upfront lump sum. So you start paying principal and interest on that home equity loan the minute that the money is transferred to you. Let's talk a little bit about a home equity line of credit. Now, a home equity line of credit, it's a revolving line of credit, and it's still secured by the equity in your home. Because it's a line of credit, it works almost like a credit card where you're able to withdraw funds as you need it. So you don't have to pay principal and interest on the entire amount because you're only going to pay principal and interest on the funds that you are needing for your project. Now, when it comes to interest rates, typically you have a variable rate. So your monthly payment is a lot lower than a home equity loan, but your interest rate can sometimes definitely be a little bit higher than your primary mortgage. How much can you borrow? Typically, it's the same as a home equity loan. You can borrow up to 85% of the equity in your home. The main thing to remember with a home equity line of credit is that you are withdrawing funds as you need it, so you only pay for that, versus a home equity loan. They give you a one lump sum, so you are paying principal and interest on the entire amount from the beginning. Now let's talk a little bit about cash out refinance. So if you are sitting with an interest rate anywhere under 5%, maybe a cash out refinance is not the best option. However, if you have maybe paid off your mortgage, getting a cash out refinance might be a great option because it replaces your existing mortgage. So if you don't have a mortgage, you start with a brand new mortgage. They do give you a one lump sum check for the difference between your two mortgages. But if you don't have a mortgage, it will just be a one lump sum that they will give you as a cash out refinance. Your interest rate is fixed or adjusted as well. And because it is a cash out, typically the mortgage rates are a lot better than the home equity loan or a line of credit. Although with the real estate environment that we're in right now with high rates, today's cash out refinance and a home equity loan and a home equity line of credit, you can anticipate for rates to be at about the same, but you want to do your research. You want to maybe get at least 3 different quotes from 3 different companies for a home equity loan, a line of credit, or a refinance to see what's your best option. And again, you want to think about how long is your project, the duration of that project, how much funds are you going to need, how soon you're going to be able to pay that loan off, to then find out if a home equity loan, a line of credit, or a cash out refinance is best for you. Let me now go into the next section here, and we will have an opportunity for Q&A. So please make sure that you are putting down your questions in the chat box so we can answer those for you. Now you might be wondering, well, how do I calculate my loan to value and how do I know how much equity I have in my home? Well, this is a simple calculation that you can use. You want to use your home value. You want to multiply that by 80%. That will give you the maximum total debt that you can have for that home. Now you want to use the maximum total debt, and you want to subtract what your current mortgage balance is. If you currently have a mortgage with a home equity line, you want to bring those two together to then subtract that from your maximum total debt. And that will give you your maximum HELOC line amount or loan or cash out refinance. Do not forget to check with your lender because they all have different loan to value limits and they all have maximum limits that they will grant you depending on a couple of factors, depending on how long you've lived in the home, how much you owe, your credit score, if you're trying to do an equity line versus a loan. So there's a lot of factors to consider, but I just wanted to leave you with this quick, easy calculation of how to calculate your maximum home equity line of credit line amount. Next, let's talk a little bit about the factors that we consider or that affect your ADU interest rate. Of course, your credit score is something that will affect your interest rate. The loan term and type. So if you're choosing a line of credit versus a loan, and if you're fixing it for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, all of that will affect your interest rate, along with the market conditions. Right now, we are on a high rate market condition. So again, you can anticipate rates to be higher on home equity loans, along with cash out refinances where maybe in 2020, 2021, because of the different market conditions that we had more favorable rates. So rates change all the time. Also, the lender policies will affect your interest rate, how high of a loan to value they let you go, what is the minimum credit score guidelines, depending on the lender that you're dealing with. So all of that can affect your interest rate. So make sure that you connect with your lender and ask all of these questions and see what their guidelines and policies are. Next, let's talk about the steps to securing your ADU loan. So when you work with your lender, they will determine the loan amount that you will need. Based on your project, you want to give an estimate amount that you might need. And obviously working with a developer and your city's Department of Building and Safety, that will help you come up with an estimate of what your loan amount might be. You also want to assess your eligibility, right? The lenders will look at your debt to income, your credit score, a couple of other factors to find out what is the maximum that they can give you on a loan. You want to research these lenders, and then ultimately you want to gather your documents, your financing documents, things such as your W-2, maybe your Social Security award letters, your bank statements, your current pay stub if you're still employed, your last year tax returns. Those are some typical documents that you can anticipate for your lender to ask you when you are applying for a home equity loan, a line of credit, or you're doing a cash out refinance. And some final things to consider. You want to make sure that you understand what permits are required. And I think in the last workshop, you kind of covered that briefly, but you want to make sure that maybe you pair up with a developer who's been doing this. Also contact the City Department of Building and Safety for your city to ask a couple of questions about permits that you might need. They might also be able to send you some sort of checklist from the city, so that way you can follow that checklist and make sure that you have all the required documents. You might want to find out if you need an architect. 99% of the time, unless you are an architect or a family or friend is an architect, you will need one. The city has many different guidelines that you need to follow, and an architect will make things a lot easier for you to ensure that your ADU is permitted and is being built to the needs and the requirements for your city. You also want to make sure that you are following local building codes. And initially, you want to make sure that you're doing all of this footwork. So by the time that your ADU is built, you have considered everything and you are not going to have any issues when you're selling your home, or maybe when you're trying to refinance your property, or when you're trying to make any changes with your ADU. Oh, and this is, a question that I get often. Is an ADU a sound investment? Well, investing in an ADU can definitely be a lucrative move, but it's its profitability really depends on various factors. You want to make sure that you're considering the location, the demand, your availability to manage the unit effectively, because technically you will be a landlord. And you want to make sure that you conduct a thorough cost benefit analysis to determine whether an ADU aligns with your financial goals. That is extremely important. And ultimately, if you have any questions, please make sure to let me know. But Patricia, I'm going to turn it back over to you so then we can go ahead and answer any other questions that we might have. But I hope that this was, although brief, informational and pointed you in the right direction when it comes to your ADU financing. So Patricia, back to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. For those of you who are just joining us, don't worry because we are recording this session. Later, you'll be able to view the recording from the start. I just want to reintroduce ourselves. You just heard from Wendy Estrada. She's a senior loan officer, and you can tell she has a lot of experience in this field. I'm Patricia Perez. I'm an AARP California volunteer, and I serve as its state president emeritus. And we're talking about ADUs. So if you have any questions about ADUs, please ask Wendy, but with particular emphasis on how to finance your ADU. Last month, we talked about ADUs, and you'll be able to watch that video as well. But Wendy, here's a question to you. Some people, I mean, I know that ADUs are usually detached, but some people are considering converting their garage or converting a room in their house and just make, separate entrance, kind of, a separate unit within their house. How would the financing work? Is it similar to an ADU or is it different?
Yeah, well, ultimately, even if you are remodeling your garage to have, a living space for a loved one, or if you are wanting the funds to actually create an entire ADU complex, then you would still want to consider either doing a home equity line of credit, a home equity loan, or a cash out refinance, because ultimately you are taking money out of your home to then build that into your home to then be able to benefit from the value increasing. So even if you're trying to convert your garage, of course, there's permits and all of that you still want to check in with your city department of building safety. But the process when it comes to financing, it's still the same. You still have to get some sort of equity loan line of credit, unless you have money in your savings account, because it might be a lot less more expensive to do that than to finance an ADU. But ultimately, it's best to use your equity because you're going to see the benefit afterwards when it comes maybe to taxes. Of course, you want to consult with your CPA on all that, but the financing is about the same.
Perfect. And I know, Wendy, you talked to us about like the first steps in terms of your loan, but how about people who are just thinking of building an ADU? What would be the first step to them? Is it talking to an architect, a contractor? What would be the first step?
Yeah, the first step, I would say, talk to a developer and go to your city's Department of Building Safety, because then you will understand from a developer standpoint how easy or how difficult or in the challenges that you may have, and maybe ask a couple of questions about the city that you live in and the specifics of your home, because that's super important. Not everyone has the same style of home. They live in the same community, right? So a developer will point you in the right direction. And ultimately, your city's Department of Building and Safety can provide you with various tools such as checklists and maybe a couple of other departments that you can call. So that way you can start the investigation part of building an ADU. So I would say start with investigating how difficult or how easy it will be, and then move on to the next step, which should be figuring out, okay, where is the money coming from?
Perfect. And I know some people are thinking of like already an existing home conversion, so then they can live there and maybe rent the rest of the house to an adult child, a relative, something like that. But what if they were actually creating an ADU for income purposes. Is there assistance on how to manage property, or how can they research? Because like you said, now they're going to be landlords. Are there any suggestions for people who've never rented before?
Yeah, well, it goes back to just doing the research, because now you are a landlord and there's different city laws also now that you are a landlord. And through 2020 and through 2021, I think a lot of landlords had to do a lot of research on their rights and what they ultimately can do, because as you know, there's this whole pandemic and people couldn't pay their rents, but the landlords still needed to pay for their financing. So ultimately, I would say start talking to people who are landlords. The financing is the same, but ultimately you do want to work with a property management company to manage that ADU for you, unless you have experience. Seek your city's assistance as well, so they can provide you with some guidance. But ultimately, if you do want to rent it, you also want to do the math on your return on investment, right? How much is this investment going to cost me? Ultimately, how much can I rent this ADU, or maybe the front unit for? And ultimately, how much is my mortgage payment, to then run the numbers and see if it's something that's going to be worth your while. Because not only are you investing money, you're also going to invest now time, technically being a landlord for that property.
Wendy, we have a question, and it's, are there any other types of loans if you do not want to use your home equity?
So there are, but they are challenging to get. I know that the city also at one point had a program where they would give you some sort of financing, and that's no longer available. And I'm hoping that they bring it back. So you can get private lenders, to give you some sort of loan. You can maybe get a loan from a relative. But ultimately, what I've seen a lot happen with ADUs is using the home equity, because it's funds that you already have built into your home. You're reusing that to reinvest in the home, and ultimately you're going to see the profits of that. If you go other lending routes, there are out there, but a lot of them come with different guidelines and also very high interest rates and repayment methods. So they're out there, but it's important to do your research.
Yes, very important, because the last thing you want to do is get into these huge commitments with really high interest rates, and the math is not going to add up for what you really want the ADU for. Right. There's a question, and it says that if they have a reverse mortgage, they assume they do not qualify for equity loans. They can only do a refi.
Right. So when it comes to reverse mortgage, it's such a specific product and it comes with its own terms. So when you signed up for a reverse mortgage, they actually gave you a breakdown of your terms and your guidelines. It's very important to go back to that and connect with your lender and ask them how or what is the process of me getting out of this reverse mortgage. Often, more than not, you have to actually refinance to get rid of that reverse mortgage. They will reapprove you for a traditional mortgage, and then you can actually use the equity in your home. Because through a reverse mortgage, technically, you're giving up that equity because they're giving you that financing every month, so you don't have access to it. So it's important to go back to those guidelines that you initially signed up for, call the lender, find out what are the steps that you can take to get out of that, to then ultimately be able to use the equity in your home.
Perfect. A question also from the audience, and can a manufactured home be an ADU?
Well, manufactured homes, it depends on where they're located, but a lot of them do require to be permanent manufactured homes where they actually are permanent. They have their own gas line, their own water line. So it can be, but that's why it's so important to connect with a developer and also your city's Department of Building and Safety to figure out what their restrictions are when it comes to manufactured homes, because there's a lot of them with manufactured homes.
Yeah, but I would imagine that that would be a cost savings, right? If you are able to do that, you just, relocate it to your property.
Right. Well, technically, yes, you do. But it goes back to what is the city permit, right? Does the city allow it? And if it does, then they for sure have many other guidelines that we have to follow.
Yeah. And when you were talking about some additional funding and grants of it that are no longer available, are you familiar of any grants, any state grants that are still available?
Not at the moment. I know that from time to time they're changing and they're coming back. And, obviously when we get the notices, we send that out and we put the message. But right now, there's nothing available to help with ADU financing that I know of.
Okay. If they were to come back, do you suggest that people should just jump and try to get those grants right away, or how would that work, Wendy? Who would qualify for, or what would be the process for securing one of those grants?
Yeah, so what I saw in the past with these grants is basically they had, the money disposable, you had to fill out an application, you had to meet the different criteria and guidelines. So if I was you and trying to get prepared for the next opportunity, go on Google, research the information from the previous guidelines, see what they had and what the guidelines were that you had to commit to or actually meet. And therefore, when the next opportunity comes, you're ready. You can also go to the city's website and actually sign up for news updates when it comes to ADUs, and they will email you different updates and different programs that are becoming available. So that way they stay, they come into your inbox and then you're able to take advantage of those programs.
That's great suggestion, Wendy, because, we know that these opportunities come and go. Sometimes, they have a very limited budget, and once that, that amount is gone, then you're out of luck. And so we should do our homework now, so we're prepared in case it becomes available, and we're not just kind of scrambling trying to get it just because it's there.
Right, right. Yeah, and a very useful website is Cal FHA. I'm going to put it in the chat box, and it gives you a little bit more information about the grant program. But the grant last time was $40,000 towards pre-development and non-reoccurring closing costs associated with the construction of an ADU. So I will put that in the chat box, and you can go and read a little bit more about this program. But as of March 1st, 2023, all of the funds have actually fully been reserved. So they'll keep us informed of any other programs, but go ahead and sign up for the newsletter, and I'll put the link in the chat box right now.
Perfect. Thank you. And there's a question. This one I'm not familiar at all. What is the difference between a home equity and a home equity line of equipment?
Well, a home equity loan or a line of credit, you're taking money out of your home, right? The equity that you have. Ultimately, if you still have a primary mortgage, it becomes a second loan with different terms, different interest rate. And then ultimately, if you get a line of credit, it works like a credit card where whatever you use, you pay it back, it becomes available again. A home equity loan, they'll give you a lump sum of money, you pay principal and interest right away on that. And it's typically termed out for whatever period you decide, whether that be 10 years, 20 years, and some even offer a 30-year home equity line of credit. For some of you who maybe bought a home in 2020, 2021, for example, you're sitting on a very favorable interest rate. So you don't want to do a cash out refinance. You want to get something separate than your primary mortgage. Maybe for those of you who bought maybe years ago and no longer have a mortgage, getting a home equity line of credit or loan, or a cash out refinance are the options, but I would go with the best interest rate option. But what was the other one? Home equity
They were asking about a equity line of equipment.
line of equipment. It might just be a home equity line of credit, because there's no such thing of a home equity line of
Yeah,
equipment,
okay.
unless you're maybe referring to something like where the construction and you need something to finance the equipment. That would be like an equipment loan. So totally, completely different.
Okay,
Mhm.
all right. Let me see. Here's a question. Somebody says the average that you mentioned between the 100 and 300,000 for the rough estimate, if that includes running electrical lines, plumbing, sewer from the street to the ADU, and if not, if there's an estimated cost of how, or estimate of how much that would cost.
Yeah, doing the research, the 100 to 300,000, that was the average, and that did include that cost, but it was for about a 400 square feet ADU. So when you are talking 500, 600, 700 square feet ADU, then you can anticipate that cost to, go way above 300,000, especially when it comes to all of the different permits that you're going to need. But a good developer should have like a past client scenario where they can show you a breakdown of maybe what that client paid for all of those fees, and then ultimately give you a peace of mind and help you decide if building an ADU is right for you, right? Because then now at least you know the cost. You can now go to your lender and ask them what the home equity line or loan or a cash out refinance payment would be, the term that you're interested, and then ultimately you can see the profit for that rental and find out if it's actually worth the numbers.
Perfect. I mean, and the great thing, I guess, of building an ADU, if the intention is for you to live in it, is that you can design it for yourself. I know that 400 square feet is might be a little tight, but
Yeah.
you can design exactly what it is that you would need, make sure that it's accessible as we age. And so you can design, whatever safety, whatever items you need for yourself, if the intention is to build it for yourself. That would be
Right.
one of the benefits.
And you might be surprised. I'm actually going to link in the chat box. College students in Woodbury University in Burbank, California, actually created a 3D printed home, and it took 15 months, and it was built for $250,000. It's a new concept, so you can probably anticipate more of this to come. But I thought that they used the space so well. And you make a good point, Patricia. I feel that, when I get close to retirement, maybe I don't want to sell my house, right? But maybe I want to live in the back, rent the front. And honestly, at that time, I wouldn't mind living in a 400 square foot home, but ultimately seeing the benefit of getting some more income, ultimately living in a space that I love, and being able to use my home's equity to finance that, to kind of give me a peace of mind. So yeah, I've put it in the chat box. Take a look. I thought it was a very interesting design. They have a really cool video too for you to view.
No, absolutely. And like I was mentioning, many people want the ADU for themselves and maybe their adult children, with properties being expensive as they are, they may not be able to, buy on their own. So that's kind of like the next best solution, is having them take over the primary residence.
Right.
Yeah. And here's a question. Are home equity loans and home equity lines of credit any easier to obtain than a home mortgage, given there is equity already built up in the property?
Yeah, great question. Yes and no. It is a little bit easier because you have the home, right? You've built equity, but ultimately they will look at your debt, your credit, and your income to finance that. And that's anywhere you go, although you might think, well, it's my house, it's my equity. Yes, but if you don't pay that back, it's still a loan. And the last thing you want is for someone to take over, your home. Now that you've built equity through all those years. So unfortunately, they will still look at your debt, your income, your credit, but the lending guidelines are a lot more flexible than when you were applying for a primary mortgage.
Okay, perfect. And are the loan standards more flexible given the additional, you know, criteria of home equity?
So say that one more time. Can you rephrase that? Because I want to.
The question is, are the loan standards more flexible? I guess if you're going through, a regular home mortgage, are they more flexible?
Yeah, they're a bit more flexible than going through a home mortgage and, buying the home for the first time. You still have to get an appraisal, as well, just like buying a home. The guidelines are a bit more flexible, but it's pretty standard, just like a home mortgage.
Okay. And for people who just joined us, you've heard this, you've started from the beginning. Thank you. Just bear with us. But with us, we have Wendy Estrada, and she's a senior loan officer, and she is bringing her expertise and sharing her knowledge with us. Of course, we encourage everybody to do their own research, and please consult the experts and whoever you go with as you take your first steps. I'm Patricia Perez. I'm an AARP California volunteer, and I serve as state president emeritus. This is being recorded, so if you're just joining us, you'll be able to view this video later on. And this is actually part 2 of an ADU series. We had 1 and 2, one being last month. And so you'll be able to watch both videos to help inform your research. Let me see. Here's a question. I heard that FHA has new rules for ADU funding. Do you know anything about that?
So FHA is a government loan, and therefore they will always have different restrictions, different funding guidelines. However, if you live in California, because of the new laws that are signed in California, allowing you to use the rental income, allowing you now to even sell an ADU as like a condominium, and so much more that's coming, the guidelines are a lot more flexible. Again, it's not one size fits all, so we have to see what your credit portfolio looks like, what your income looks like, what type of project you're trying to get into, and ultimately figure out if it's the best for you. But FHA does have better guidelines right now for ADUs.
All right, thank you. Here's a question, it's kind of specific.
Okay.
Is it less costly to convert a garage that is already permitted workspace? They're saying that half of the garage is a legal workshop and about 20 by 20 square foot. Would it cost less to convert, being it is already a legal workshop, or should they convert to a single unit?
Well, that's a tough question to answer before seeing, right, the garage. But ultimately, I think it would be less expensive to go that route than completely build a brand new ADU where you have to pay a developer, you have to pay all these permit fees, you have to buy everything that's needed in the home, right? Bathroom, kitchen, this, that, where now the garage, it's already up and running. It sounds like you have some of the legal documents that are needed. So it's definitely going to be a lot less expensive.
Yeah, perfect. And probably even faster. I mean, you never know in terms of permits, but still, it sounds like,
Right. Definitely a lot faster.
Yeah, perfect. Here's a question regarding an ROI. So the return on investment. And how should people calculate the return of investment if they intend to rent the ADU?
Right. So ultimately, you're going to figure out what is the cost, right? When you're buying anything, how much is this going to cost me? And then ultimately, what is the return on investment? So what you're going to do is, let's say it cost you $300,000 to build this ADU. However, you have no mortgage. So your mortgage payment is now going to be, let's say, $1,700, right? Just an example. Now you're going to look at your return on investment. Once this is done and built, how much can you rent this out for on a monthly basis? Let's say you can rent this out for $1,000, right? So ultimately you are netting negative $700 on a monthly basis because of the math example that we're doing. However, ultimately you want to see, well, how long am I netting this negative $700 for? And when is kind of the break even point, right? So if I break even in, let's say, 10 years from the math calculation, then I'm okay with it, because for the next 20 years, I'm going to be able to rent this out and ultimately net $1,700. But I had an initial loss. And I think with every investment, unless you can rent this for double than what it costs you to build, you're ultimately going to have a negative profit in the beginning. You want to find out when you break even, and ultimately you're going to have those years of a profit. But it all comes down to the numbers. So we want to know what the cost is going to be, what your rental approximate benefit will be, and when your break-even point, and ultimately find out if you're even going to live in that home for that long, or if it's an investment home, a second home, right? So all of that will be you'll be able to factor to see if it's the right time, and if it's going to actually be a good return on investment for you.
Absolutely. And there are so many considerations, right? If you need the immediate income,
Right.
then you really do have to calculate the cost of that. So it starts, being a benefit. So you may not have, how long did you say, 7 years or so?
Right.
Yeah. But if, like we were talking, if that is for you and you want to rent the first, the primary residence to a relative, then maybe that might not be the issue. And so you already know that you're going to have a loss, but hopefully at the long term, there's going to be a gain. So yeah, good to assess really what it is that you want to try to figure out financing that makes sense for that. And yeah, but if you are looking for it for a very quick, additional income, then, be smart about your financing, the cost of construction, all of that.
Right.
Wendy, many of our members are retired. People on this call are retired. Are there loan issues, or are there any funding considerations when it comes to people who may be retired, who may be on fixed income?
Right. So when it comes to, being on fixed income and kind of covering the financing and making sure that you can afford it, right, when it comes to the numbers, there's a couple of things that we will consider. One of them being, what is the potential rental cost that you will, or the rental benefit for you? And we will factor that into the financing. We will also factor things such as your Social Security award, your pension. Maybe you have a daughter or a son, someone who wants to be a non-occupant co-borrower, for us to be able to use their income, but they're not necessarily going to live in the property. That's another way that we could look into the financing. But again, projecting what that rental cost will be, that often more than not helps our fixed income borrowers. But we want to make sure that we're also using any additional income that you get on a monthly basis, because it is unfortunate, but they are giving you a loan, so they need to make sure that you qualify. There's other ways that you can qualify, but we got to look at all of the different ways.
So it connects to another question. So it does help to state that it is going to be rental. So it's going to be additional revenue, and you kind of factor that additional revenue into the calculations. So rather than saying, yeah, I'm going to live there and right? So
Right. Yeah.
it's,
And then ultimately you want to make sure that you are reporting, the rental income on your returns,
right.
because as you want to do and make changes to your loan or apply for different lending, then you're going to be able to show the rental history in your returns for us to be able to use that.
Yeah, perfect. But as you're starting out, it also helps to say it is
Correct.
going to be rental, so that way they can project those
Correct.
amounts into your loan.
Mhm.
Oh, perfect. Um, what are the tax implications of an ADU? I know, can people write off the construction of it, or do you have any insight on that?
When it comes to taxes, it can be so complicated, right? And I know that you can definitely write off your interest payments if you're making any upgrades or changes to your homes, but depending on your tax bracket and if you're married, single, filing jointly, there's different standard deductions and there's itemized deductions that you can get. However, everyone has different financial situations and different finances, and you need to make sure that you connect with your accountant or your tax preparer to find out if that's actually going to be a benefit for you, and how can this new investment either help you or not help you when it comes to your taxes. So make sure that you connect with a professional.
Perfect. Um, let's see, Wendy, are there any additional tips that you can give people? I know that you went through your whole, PowerPoint presentation. Some people joined us late, but do you want to give some quick rundown of some of the key tips that you shared?
Yeah, I think ultimately do your research. So go on Google, just, Google is ADU financing in California. You're going to get so much information from the city, from maybe different builders, different developers. Connect with individuals who have built an ADU, try to ask questions, and ultimately connect with a professional to run the numbers, find out if it's the right time for you. Let them know what your goals are in financing this ADUs to see if it's actually a good fit. And then ultimately find out, like, what's your reason, right? If your reason is for a loved one or for rental, I think it's a great time to actually start looking at those numbers. And if it makes sense now, then why not? And ultimately wait for these programs, because California will have this program again, but unfortunately after March, it's no longer available. So stay informed and talk to professionals. I think it's my best tip.
Yeah, and you were saying, talk to people who have done this,
Yes.
do
Yeah.
your research, talk to from your CPA, your accountant, whatever, and just start, square one. And also do, I guess, a self-assessment to figure out what it is that you really want. Why do you want this?
Right.
Is this for yourself, or is this for income? And so,
Yeah.
um,
Because
yeah.
it can turn into a headache, and we want to make sure we check everything off before you sign on the dotted line.
Oh, and we're just talking about the first steps, right? Of deciding
Right.
what it is you want to do and secure financing.
Right.
We're not even touching the construction and the contractors and the architects and the zoning and the permits. So that's a whole different area that you really, really do need to watch out for and make sure that you are, doing everything that properly. Let's see, before we go, here's an additional question.
Yeah.
We have seen on social media companies are offering ADUs without financing hassle. What? They cover the financing and build it with cash or cash out of our pocket. Do you know what the catch is? Is it too good to be true? Ah,
Oh, it might be. I am a huge believer of reading the fine print. Read the fine print, do your research on the company, and ultimately find out if it's actually a true statement. Because as you know, there's a lot of marketing tactics, and unless you someone who has gone through the same process and they've been successful, then I would believe them. Otherwise, read the fine print.
Yeah, I don't understand how they could build it without any cash or cash out of pocket. I mean,
Yeah.
there's got to be some, before you know it, they'll own my house.
Yeah, well, that's probably it. They'll have to sign over the deed, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
anyone will do that, right? Anyone
Yeah.
will give you a loan, sign over the deed, and you have to make sure. Oh, last thing, you want to make sure that you're checking your property title at least on an annual basis, if not every couple of years. There's a lot of fraud happening. There's a lot of changes that can happen when your property title, and not until you go through a lending need, that's when you find out that, oh, my name's not even on the title, or this person's name is still on it. So you want to make sure that you're checking with your county clerk in regards to your property title, or if you have an escrow company that you trust, you can give them a call and they could just simply review your property title and make sure that it's the way that you want it to be.
Wendy, that is excellent advice. We're always, of course, warning people to watch out. Yeah, I tell you, these talks are all about helping people keep and grow their money. The last thing we want to do is be scammed or lose, and especially, for us older adults, absolutely.
Yeah. And it could happen to anyone. You know, you're busy, you're taking one call, doing this, that, the other. Don't ever give any information. Make sure you're vetting these experts that you're connecting with, because there is a lot of fraud out there. And unfortunately, they do target, our age audience. And I hate that, but we have to make sure that we're protected for sure.
Absolutely. And speaking of taxes, will property taxes be reevaluated with an ADU? Does it go up by square footage?
Yeah, that's the tough part, because you are building. So now your property value has gone up, meaning that your property taxes go up as well. So they will be reassessed. And the only person that could really tell you, or the only department that could tell you a little bit more about the taxes, are the city of LA, because they have your tax bill. They know exactly. They can even give you an example of, if your property increased to X amount, how much can you anticipate for your property taxes, and how all of that will work out. So again, it goes back to doing the research pre building an ADU, right? Make sure you have that on your checklist as far as tax implication, because your property taxes will increase.
Perfect. And seriously, Wendy, thank you so much for opening up the awareness of fraud. That is, a huge priority for us. So we encourage everybody to do your research, contact people that you know, go with those that you trust, do your homework, make sure people, are licensed. Just in every step of the way when it comes to doing these projects. We've heard of people, contractors who demand money up front and then never come back. So many things. So many things. We don't want to scare you, but we want to make you aware. So I just want to, let's see, we're getting close to the end. So Wendy, thank you for all the great information that you gave us. We put Wendy's information on the chat. So if you want to contact Wendy, please, you can contact her directly. And obviously there are many, many resources available, including on the chat also the AARP Fraud Watch. But I also want to mention that AARP has online resources that provide information on our website. So please visit aarp.org, and you can just add what you're searching for, and I'm sure you're going to find it, including ADUs and fraud prevention, fraud awareness, all of that. Wendy, mil gracias. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights with us. And I mentioned this is the second part. You can view later. You'll be able to view this video and the first one on aarp.org. Let's talk dinero. And in these chats, we talk about with experts across the state, talking about debt management, investing, retirement planning, entrepreneurship, and much, much more. And please mark your calendars, Monday, November 27 at 4 p.m. So that's Monday, November 27th, 4 p.m. That's going to be our next Let's Talk Dinero event. Remember, AARP is here for you and with you with resources and events to help you choose how you live as you age. And visit us online, aarp.org/Let's Talk Dinero. Again, Wendy, mil gracias. Thank you so much for joining us. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. We'll see you next time. Hasta luego. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, AARP. Appreciate it. Bye.
Bye, everybody.